Well, I just feel like there is this misconception that EDs happen like because you want to look appealing to men, and it's like, well, that's not true at all for me. I'm a lesbian. That's never been an issue.
I'll be your one, you'll be mine too. You are my only point of view.
So, hi, my pronouns are she, her, and I'm a Korean American lesbian.
My name is Maddie Grace. I use she, they pronouns. I'm a queer transgender woman.
My name is Megan. My pronouns are she, her. I am a cisgender queer woman.
My name is Chris Cochran. I am a Black trans African Nova Scotian. Pronoun is she and her.
My name is Jeffrey Soto. I'm gay. Pronouns are he, him.
So my name is Keisha. My pronouns are they and them. I am a two-spirited, multiracial, multi-personality individual.
My name is Everett Fournier. I use he, him, and they, them pronouns. So I do identify as a trans man. I also identify as a non-binary person because I think those are spectrums. I identify as a trans man, but I also identify with being non-binary. So I use he, him, and they, them.
So I'm a lesbian, and my pronouns are she and her.
For me, what I've come to realize about my eating disorder is that, yes, there was a lot of stuff about like focusing on like weight and body image issues, but it was really like me trying to like deal with some like trauma issues and like depression, and just like feeling like I don't have a lot of control in my life. But at least I can control my body and my food intake.
When I was a teenager, yeah, everything was about my grades, but being repressed and not having so many friends, I kind of like consoled myself with food. And then my mom died when I was 19, turning 20. You know, that was very traumatic as well. Like, kind of ate my way through that process as well, just to kind of feel better. So food was one of the ways that I consoled myself through all of that.
A lot of my family had moved out west. A lot of things were changing. A lot of things were just kind of out of my control and were just happening to me. And I found something that I got a say in of like a sea of things where I didn't have a lot of control. Food became a thing I got to control, and I got a say in, and I got to help dictate.
I have a memory of wishing on a shooting star that my waist would be smaller. It started very early.
The thing with eating disorders, I feel like, is that it really takes so much of your memory, I feel like. So a lot of those years were just a blur, but I did have like some disordered eating starting around when I was like a teenager. But I was like officially diagnosed with anorexia when I was like 24, I think.
I'm really bad with years, but I have a benchmark for when stuff kind of started happening. The eating disorder, severe eating disorder stuff probably started like 24, 25.
I didn't realize I had an eating disorder because, again, I grew up in the 80s and 90s. You don't have an eating disorder because you're not losing weight. You're not skinny. Heroin chic was big. Well, I'm definitely not that. It wasn't until I started my transition and I had to go through therapy. And they were like, have you ever had any kind of eating disorder? And I was like, oh no, I've always been a big person. And he was like, what do you mean by that? I was like, well, I've always been like a bigger kid ever since I was in my teenage years. So like, but did you have an eating disorder? And I was like, no, I told you I was too big to have an eating disorder. He's like, but overeating is a thing. I was like, no, it isn't. I'm from an African background. No, it's not. Overeating is not a thing, you know?
when I was a teenager, there was just a big debate going on, first about gay marriage in Canada and then about gay marriage in the US. So there was a lot of like public debate about like, is it okay to be gay? Like, are gay people going to hell? Like public debate over myself as a human. So yeah, I think that impacted my self-image, even if it wasn't really about body image or eating disorders at that point.
When you're coming out of the closet, you want this sort of validation that, not only of, not going to hell, being loved by your family, being liked by friends, but then there's also like, you always want that validation of just being desired, right?
I think growing up, I always knew that I felt a little bit differently. I didn't feel the same way about, girls my age that other girls my age did. And that frightened me. I really felt like my body was betraying me in those desires. And I thought, okay, well, I'm gonna wrest control from you. It felt like my body could be a place where I could have full and total control over everything. And if it was gonna betray me, it was not gonna be, it could be in that way, but not in this way.
Being a person who identifies as non-binary, there's this push to androgyny, which, because androgyny often focuses on a like slim male presentation based off like a white European framework, this larger framed, well-curved bone structure person of color is not going to fit that very easily. The first time I'd started restricting, we were in a grocery store and someone had identified me as sir instead of miss when they had first seen me, and my brain had been like, ha! Haha! I have expanded past the assumption that I am woman on sight.
I always say representation matters because sometimes you don't know who you are until you see it in the world sometimes, right? Or you think you're the only one. So growing up, I never really thought I had a section or a place to be with or a group of people or a community. So I was like, okay, this is, different. And again, this is the 80s and 90s. We didn't have Google. We had Dewey Decimal System. And you actually had to know what the word was for you to find that word out, right?
Social media, it has helped a lot of people gain access to education around different parts of like queer terminology and like different identities, and has like given people the ability to learn more about themselves. Unfortunately, when social media happened, there was far more people to witness you and far more people to misgender you on a regular basis, to make assumptions about you, to like witness your transition. And now, instead of being able to like go home at the end of the day and separate yourself from those communities have access to you 24/7.
I would look at television or media. There was not a lot of gay people in the media back then. There was just like Ellen, Will and Grace, and Queer as Folk and stuff, and they're all beautiful and attractive. You would watch them on TV, and they were just like these very fierce gay men, very unapologetic, very confident in themselves, and very sexy, and like having lots of sex, and just like no restraints and no shame. And looking at that, I was like, I want to live life like that. And then I looked at myself and I was still like that stocky teenager. Like, do I need to lose weight in order for people to be attracted to me?
There's an episode of Skins with Casey. It is the British version. Seeing this on TV was one of the first and only times that I saw the way that I was managing my eating disorder on television. And every other way that I'd seen it had been so exacerbated and dramatized, was that Casey would do this thing where she would get a meal and she would move all her food around her plate and take bites and talk and put them down. And I was doing the exact same thing, and I did not know I was doing the exact same thing. And she was having this anxiety shame cycle with her eating disorder. And I thought that was a really interesting representation of how people have eating disorders that aren't as dramatic as, some of these ways that I feel like they're represented. It's just these subtle things that people do.
I deeply believe that eating disorders are a social justice issue. So I think it also came down to realizing that there are people who make money off of me disliking myself, right? So it came down to, first of all, challenging those thought patterns, and second of all, almost getting a little bit righteously angry about this, going, okay, so I wake up and I feel terrible because my skin X, Y, and Z, or my body A, B, and C, or my hair, you know. And then I was like, who's profiting from this? Who's making money when I feel terrible?
I think there's a tendency sometimes to just think, well, if we just have better media, then eating disorders will go away. And I think it's a little bit more complicated than that. But there's a whole other piece of addressing eating disorders, and we kind of need to do that, but we also need to address it as a mental illness and have like support and mental health treatment.
Eating disorders and mental health, like, there's such a huge overlap with that. Like, you know, whether it is you feel like your life is spiraling out of control and you need something, or you are in a situation where you don't feel particularly safe, so you don't feel like you're in control of your life. Like, I've used the word control like 1,000 times so far, and I think that's something that I keep coming back to. Is just like, it is, you know, it's always, you're always trying to keep the boat floating. You're always trying to stay above water. As a queer person, you just have all of these oppressive forces just like constantly coming down on you. It's not uncommon for like queer people to have almost like a stunted adolescence, because you lose so many years to just being confused and trying to navigate things and trying to like figure things out.
But then when we talk about eating disorders, there also needs to be interventions and supports for people, and an acknowledgement that sometimes there's other mental illness that are factors. There's like aspects of more like biological or neurobiological factors. There's like family and trauma factors for some people. And there's other disorders like ADHD or OCD or depression.
Like when I look back at my depression, on the idea is that like some days getting out of bed is really hard. You just don't have the energy to do anything. So having to prepare yourself food is a whole new outlet.
I'm like Korean, and it's just like, it's not really thought of as like those sorts of issues like don't impact like people like us. Like, I think I actually told my mom at one point that I do have anorexia. She was just like these American doctors don't understand that Koreans are like really skinny and that we don't eat that much. And it's like, well, that was not helpful at all. And just like acting like my actual like life-threatening like anorexia is like not a big deal.
Just like degendering the healthcare world. Like, it's just so weird to me sometimes. Just because I'm born with something just like means that every time I go into a space, they're making assumptions about who I am. The fact that I have to go in and like get a PAPS smear or whatever, you know, like have to be so much about my gender just because I was born a certain way.
Well, for me, societal norms, you know, being a trans woman, you know, some people think that because I'm a trans woman, I'm supposed to look, act, and dress a certain way. But that's not necessarily, you know, that's expression, and people confuse gender with expression. Gender's in here, expression is out here. And then in our community, in the trans community, because we got so many people telling us, no, you can't do this, no, you can't do this, no, you can't do this, we preach your body, your mind, your journey. Body positivity is okay. If you're bigger, embrace it. It's great. Be yourself. But unfortunately, it doesn't sometimes take into account of health. We can be fully yourselves and be plus size, but are you healthy?
I guess I think for me, there's a difference between actually being in treatment, but then actually taking like a personal commitment to it, if that makes sense.
After kind of officially coming to terms with like where I was at with my gender identity, with like my sexuality, with all of those things, and being like, I'm trans. I gotta take care of it. And that was such a weight off that I was able to like shift some of my focus to address the other things that I had going on.
The movement towards trying to like make calories more visible and make people hyper focused on what they're eating and make people really aware of their weight isn't necessarily a good solution for people who have eating disorders, obviously, but it's also maybe not a healthy solution for people who don't have eating disorders. It doesn't teach kids like a very balanced message about food, and it doesn't teach them a healthy message about their self-image and what's important about them.
Who is sitting there making these rules? Is it a bunch of straight white cis men sitting at a table making these rules? Or is there a trans person there? Is there a person of color there? Is there a non-binary person there? Because these rules are being made for these people. Why are these people not at that table making these rules?
There's not a ton of like out doctors, and there's not a ton of like, you're always navigating a system that's like a system, like CIS. Like you're always trying to figure out your way to like weasel your way through this system that isn't set up for you.
So picture being the average citizen that has to go find a family doctor. How hard is it to find help being that? Now, take being queer. Then you're also not just queer, you're also plus size. But you're not just also plus size, you're trans. And you're not just also trans, you're trans that's neurodivergent. Oh, and you're racialized, you're black. All of those things. Now, the average citizen has the hardest time finding it. You have all of this you have to deal with.
You're gay, trans, and have an eating disorder? Like, I don't know what the fuck to do with you.
Like, normalize having a dietitian. Normalize that there's no such thing as bad food. Let's get you support as quickly as possible, exactly where you are. People in your care system care about you and they want to know how they can help make you feel better. But having someone ask you what will help right now when you're already not in a good headspace is a really hard question because you don't have the answer. But if you already have it written down and you already have it laid out, you can pull something from that. And you got to make this list when you're in a good headspace. You got to make this list like when you're on the up.
I think there has to be a baseline sense of safety, a baseline level of therapeutic communication where a person needs to know that you are safe. There is a failure to recognize that very often being queer or being gay, it does serve to marginalize your personhood a lot of times.
Like the baseline thing, and it's so easy, is like if you're going somewhere new and they have an intake form and they have like list your pronouns on it, like something as simple as that is really beneficial. Anybody in a professional setting, like for the most part, should be wearing a pronoun pin.
Consult the people that you are hoping to help.
How do I give myself something to look at that I like, to remind myself that my body can be a canvas and my body can be a way in which I showcase myself to others instead of being something I'm fighting. And so like getting a set of like washable markers to be able to like draw on yourself, and like maybe you don't like this part of yourself, but put something on it that you do like. And focus on then the art piece you have made yourself. Because then it gives you something else to look at. It gives a barrier point between you and an element you're struggling with.
Literally, like, gender is a spectrum, sexuality is a spectrum, eating disorders are a spectrum. Like, it is such a spectrum of different experiences. And you're getting told different things at every single angle. Like, within, like, this is how you should look as a trans man. This is how you should look as a non-binary person. This is how you should look as a woman. It's just like a fucking mess of information that we get told so young. And I spent my entire young adulthood trying to unpack all of that shit to get to a place where I could just love myself. Like, that is it. That is all I'm trying to do. And I just think it's like really important to recognize that a lot of people are going through that experience. And the more we can normalize these conversations, the more people can come to those conclusions for themselves to love themselves earlier in their lives.
One of the biggest things especially in the queer community, is we are so great to talk. We love to talk. I'm from Cape Breton, so I'm a queer person, black queer woman from Cape Breton who's a drag queen. So obviously I love to talk, but the real conversation starts with listening.
I hear a lot from people like eating disorders are forever, like it'll never leave you. You always have to be vigilant about not relapsing. But I honestly feel like that's really pessimistic, and I don't think it's true for myself. Like, I'm not trying to be like corny or whatever, but I genuinely feel like right now I feel like truly recovered. Like, I recognized that my eating disorder was a way to cope, and I just found some other coping mechanisms to deal with like feelings and stuff like that.
And it was like really helpful for me to shift that perspective from like, I need to have no anxiety about food and eating to, okay, I'm going to have more anxiety about food and eating than probably like most people who don't have eating disorders, but I can still like not actively act on an eating disorder, and I can still do what I want and like go back to school and cheesy, but like have a full life and all that stuff, despite that. So yeah.
I would remind people going through the process that it's important to look at that you're navigating it and not that you're stopping, because shame is the thing that will pull you back the most. Shame is a guilt-based mechanism designed to pull you back down. And when you learn that when you fail, it's okay, and it's a part of learning and it's a part of growing, it will help you along your healing journey not to feel like you are taking so many steps backwards every time things aren't perfect.